So I want to talk about the hidden trauma that really broke Mutley's little heart. I've had dogs since I was a child. I thought I understood everything about canine behaviour, about loss, about how pets process grief. I was wrong. What I discovered about Mutley's trauma goes beyond anything I've seen in decades of living with dogs. This isn't just about a dog missing his owners. This is about a creature who witnessed the slow, agonising death of love itself twice and carried that emotional wreckage in ways that nearly destroyed him. If you own a dog, especially a Shih Tzu, what I'm about to reveal will change how you see every behaviour, every reaction, every moment of anxiety your pet displays. Because Mutley didn't just lose his family, he experienced something far more devastating that most people never even consider. Growing up with dogs, I learned to read their moods, their needs, their personalities. I thought I'd seen every type of canine grief and trauma, but Mutley taught me that there are depths of animal suffering that we rarely acknowledge, let alone understand. The first crack in his world wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like most tragedies are. The elderly woman who had been half of his universe simply stopped waking up one morning. But here's what nobody talks about. When a pet loses someone they love, something I never fully grasped despite all my years with dogs, dogs don't understand death the way we do. They understand absence. They understand the sudden, inexplicable void where warmth and routine used to be. For Mutley, a Shih Tzu bred specifically for human companionship, this wasn't just loss, it was the beginning of his world unraveling. And having lived with dogs my entire life, I can tell you that what happened to Mutley was unlike anything I had ever witnessed. The breed factor changed everything I thought I knew. Shih Tzus process grief differently than other breeds I've known. While the German Shepherds of my childhood might become protective, or the Golden Retrievers might seek comfort from other family members, Shih Tzus internalise. They absorb. They become emotional sponges for everything happening around them. When the woman died, Mutley didn't just miss her, he felt the grief radiating from the man, the changed energy in the house, the visitors who came and went with hushed voices and sad faces. He was drowning in emotions he couldn't understand, carrying the weight of everyone's sorrow in his tiny body. In all my years of dog ownership, I had never seen an animal so completely overwhelmed by human emotion. The behavioural changes started immediately, but they were subtle. Mutley began sleeping in the woman's spot on the bed, not out of comfort, but out of desperate hope. He would sit by her chair for hours waiting. His appetite decreased, his playfulness vanished. But the man, already struggling with his own grief, didn't notice. How could he? He was fighting his own battle with loss while his mind was beginning its own terrifying transformation. But the real nightmare was just beginning, and it challenged everything I thought I understood about dogs. What happened next is something that haunts me, something that made me question decades of experience with canine behaviour. As the man's Alzheimer's progressed, Mutley experienced something that no dog should ever have to endure. He watched his remaining anchor, his last source of love and stability, slowly disappear while still being physically present. Imagine loving someone with every fibre of your being and then watching them become a stranger in the body you recognise. That's what Mutley lived through every single day. I've seen dogs adapt to owners with disabilities, with illnesses, with major life changes. But I had never witnessed a dog trying to cope with an owner's cognitive decline. Dogs are masters at reading human emotions. They can detect changes in our scent, our body language, our energy, sometimes before we're even aware of them ourselves. As the man's cognitive abilities declined, Mutley would have sensed the confusion, the fear, the frustration. The man who used to greet him with consistent love and attention became unpredictable. Some days he was the loving owner Mutley remembered. Other days he was a confused stranger who might forget to feed him or become agitated by his presence. The cruelest part? Mutley's loyalty never wavered. Even as his world became chaotic and frightening, he stayed devoted to this man who was slowly vanishing before his eyes. He couldn't understand why his beloved humans sometimes looked at him with confusion instead of recognition. He couldn't comprehend why the gentle hands that used to pet him might now push him away in moments of Alzheimer's-induced agitation. And what I discovered next explains everything about his later aggression. Here's where the science gets terrifying and where my lifelong experience with dogs suddenly felt inadequate. Shih Tzus, more than almost any other breed I've encountered, experience what researchers call emotional contagion. They don't just observe human emotions, they absorb them, mirror them, and carry them in their own nervous systems. When humans experience chronic stress, anxiety, or grief, these dogs literally take on those emotional states as their own. Mutley wasn't just witnessing trauma, he was living it, feeling it, carrying it in his body like a toxic burden he couldn't put down. During those months of the man's decline, Mutley became an unwilling emotional sponge. Every moment of the man's confusion became Mutley's confusion. Every flash of fear or agitation was absorbed into Mutley's nervous system. Every night of restless wandering, every moment of Alzheimer's-induced paranoia, every instance of the man not recognizing his own home became part of Mutley's reality. He was experiencing a form of secondary trauma that, despite all my years with dogs, I had never even realized was possible in animals. The man's family, focused on the human tragedy unfolding, had no idea that Mutley was silently carrying the emotional weight of the entire household. He was grieving the woman's death, processing the man's cognitive decline, and absorbing the stress and sadness of everyone who came to visit. For a dog bred to be a companion, to read human emotions and respond to them, this was psychological torture, but the abandonment that followed would shatter him completely. The day they took the man to the nursing home, Mutley experienced what I can only describe as a double abandonment. Having grown up with dogs, I thought I understood separation anxiety, the pain of temporary departures. But this was different. First, there was the physical abandonment. The man he had devoted his life to simply left and never came back. But there was also an emotional abandonment that had been happening gradually for months. The man's Alzheimer's had already taken away the emotional connection, the recognition, the consistent love that Mutley craved. So when the physical body finally left, Mutley had already been mourning the loss of the man's mind, his personality, his ability to love. The house became a tomb, not just quiet, but energetically dead. For weeks, Mutley's only human contact was a neighbour who rushed in, poured food, and left. No words, no touch, no acknowledgement of his existence beyond basic survival. For a breed that thrives on human interaction, this wasn't just neglect. It was sensory deprivation. It was emotional starvation. In all my years of dog ownership, I had never seen an animal so completely cut off from the human connection they desperately needed. Think about what this meant for Mutley's developing psyche. He had lost his female owner to death. He had lost his male owner to disease and then to physical absence. He had lost his home's warmth, its routine, its purpose. He was trapped in a space that held the ghosts of everyone he had ever loved, with no understanding of why they had all disappeared. The neighbours' brief visits weren't comfort. They were reminders of what he had lost, painful glimpses of human contact that only emphasised his isolation. And this is where his story becomes a warning for every dog owner. During those weeks alone, Mutley's brain was rewiring itself for survival. The trauma he had absorbed, the losses he had endured, the isolation he was experiencing, all of it was creating new neural pathways based on hypervigilance and defensive aggression. He wasn't becoming a bad dog. He was becoming a traumatized dog, one whose nervous system had learned that humans bring pain, that love leads to abandonment, that the safest strategy is to attack before being hurt again. When I finally arrived to rescue him, I wasn't just dealing with a grieving pet. Despite all my experience with dogs since childhood, I was completely unprepared for what I encountered. I was dealing with a dog who had experienced complex trauma, who had absorbed years of human suffering, who had been emotionally abandoned before being physically abandoned. His aggression wasn't random or breed related. It was a trauma response, a desperate attempt to protect himself from experiencing any more loss. The resource guarding, the territorial behaviour, the refusal to be touched, all of it made perfect sense when viewed through the lens of his experience. He wasn't guarding food or space, he was guarding his heart, his remaining sense of safety, his last shred of control in a world that had repeatedly torn away everything he loved. But here's what shocked me most about his recovery. The breakthrough in Mutley's healing didn't come from traditional training methods or behavioural modification techniques I had learned over the years. It came from understanding that his aggression was actually love turned inside out. Every growl was a plea for the pain to stop. Every defensive posture was a desperate attempt to prevent another abandonment. Every moment of hypervigilance was his way of trying to control an uncontrollable world. The moment I realised this, everything changed. All my years of dog experience suddenly clicked into a new understanding. I stopped trying to train away his trauma and started trying to heal it. I stopped seeing his behaviour as problematic and started seeing it as communication. He wasn't being difficult, he was being honest about his pain. He wasn't being aggressive, he was being protective of the only thing he had left, himself. The healing process was agonisingly slow because trauma doesn't follow a timeline. Some days, Mutley would make progress, allowing me to sit closer or accepting a treat without snatching it defensively. Other days, he would retreat back into his protective shell, overwhelmed by memories or triggers I couldn't even identify. But gradually, with patience and consistency, he began to trust that I wasn't going to disappear like everyone else had. The turning point came when I realised that Mutley needed to learn that human presence could be boring, predictable, and safe. Instead of trying to force an interaction, I simply existed in his space without demands or expectations. I read books, watched television, went about my daily routine while he observed from his safe distance. Slowly, he began to understand that I wasn't going to hurt him, leave him, or change into someone he didn't recognise. And what happened next revealed the true depth of his capacity for love. When Mutley finally began to heal, what emerged wasn't just a normal dog. What emerged was a creature whose capacity for love had been deepened by his experience with loss. He had learned to love fiercely because he understood how precious and fragile that love could be. His affection, when it finally came, was intense and unwavering because he had experienced life without it. But his recovery also revealed something disturbing about how we handle pet trauma in our society. Despite growing up with dogs and thinking I understood their emotional needs, Mutley's story opened my eyes to how much we miss. His story isn't unique. Thousands of pets experience similar trauma when families face medical crises, death, or major life changes. Yet we rarely consider the emotional impact on our animals. We focus on their physical needs while ignoring their psychological wounds. The statistics are shocking. During family medical crises, pet abandonment rates increase by over 300%. When elderly owners develop dementia or require nursing home care, their pets are often the forgotten victims. These animals who have spent years bonding with their humans are suddenly displaced without any understanding of why their world has collapsed. Here's what every pet owner needs to understand. If your dog is displaying unusual aggression, anxiety, or behavioural changes, don't dismiss it as breed characteristics or bad temperament. Look deeper. Consider what trauma they might be carrying, what losses they might be processing, what changes in your household might be affecting them more than you realise. Having lived with dogs my entire life, I can tell you that Mutley taught me to see behaviours I had previously dismissed as something much deeper and more significant. Dogs, especially companion breeds like Shih Tzus, are emotional barometers for their families. They absorb our stress, our grief, our anxiety, and they carry it in their bodies. When we're going through difficult times, they're going through them too, but without the cognitive ability to understand or process what's happening. If you're facing a family medical crisis, if you're dealing with the loss of a family member, if you're going through major life changes, pay attention to your pet. They're not just witnesses to your trauma, they're participants in it. They need support, consistency, and understanding just as much as the humans in the family do. The warning signs are often subtle. Changes in appetite, sleep patterns, or energy levels. Increased clinginess or withdrawal. Unusual aggression or fearfulness. These aren't just behavioural quirks, they're cries for help from an animal who can't verbalise their emotional pain. But there's hope in Mutley's story. Today, Mutley is a different dog, but he's not the same dog he was before his trauma. He's deeper, more intuitive, more appreciative of love when it comes. His experience with loss has made him treasure the present moment in ways that untouched dogs never learn. He sleeps closer, loves harder, and seems to understand that every day of happiness is a gift. His recovery taught me that trauma doesn't have to be the end of the story. With patience, understanding, and consistent love, even the most damaged hearts can heal. But it also taught me that despite all my years with dogs, I still had so much to learn about their emotional complexity and their capacity for both suffering and healing. Mutley's journey from a terrified, aggressive survivor to a loving companion wasn't just about training or behaviour modification. It was about healing, about learning to trust again, about discovering that love doesn't always lead to loss. His story is a testament to the resilience of the canine spirit and a warning about the hidden costs of human tragedy on our animal companions. If you're watching this and you recognise signs of trauma in your own pet, don't wait. Don't assume they'll get over it on their own. Seek help from professionals who understand animal psychology and trauma. Your pet's emotional health is just as important as their physical health, and they deserve the same care and attention we would give to any family member who would experience such profound loss. Mutley's story isn't just about one dog's journey through trauma and recovery. It's about the invisible bonds between humans and animals, the responsibility we have to protect not just their bodies, but their hearts, and the incredible capacity for healing that exists when love is patient enough to wait for trust to return. What tragic story might your pet be carrying for you? And more importantly, what are you going to do about it?